I didn't have a particular strong bond with my brother. You know, we talked about everything. We did everything together, even though
Okay.
he's 3 years older than me.
Yes.
You know, he shared things. He shared nearly everything with me.
I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. That's good. That's good. I fully understand that, actually. Yeah. So there you are. You lived in your father's home in the room.
Yeah. So I went there for. I couldn't join the Air Force. They said I was too young, but to come back and apply a year later. And so I had this year gap where I was at in this room really, because my dad came and went, but I could count on one hand the number of conversations that we had in that year.
So what did you do? What did you do with yourself to occupy your time?
I walked the streets.
Really?
Yeah, I went to Brixton most days walking around. I went into the West End and walked around. It was a bit dodgy. I didn't realize it at the time, but
yeah, and because at that age, did you ever get sort of arrested or anything by the Bobby seeing you walking on the street, sort of?
No, I didn't. I went out to a nightclub. You know, I went out to a nightclub once, and I did feel that I was in a dodgy situation where when I was I was walking home from the West End to Brixton at night, and this car kept on coming along and asking me to get into this car, and I was thinking, damn man, this is dodgy. I need to get myself out of here. Apart from that, I was really trying to pick up girls and stuff like that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So you eventually then.
I hope my kids don't see this.
So what? So you ultimately joined the Royal Air Force?
Yeah. So I was for that year that I was waiting to join the Air Force, I got 2 jobs. One was in a bakery, because my dad had 2 cousins that worked in a bakery. They were the chef bakers on the day shifts and the night shift, and they got me a job in the bakery, right? In the bakery, putting jam in donuts.
Really?
Yes. It's the most boring job in the world. And I knew then, right, I needed to do more than this, right? So I did that for about 6 months or less than that, putting jam in donuts, basically picking up dough from here, pushing it onto this machine, which injected jam in it and put it in a tray. Do that for 8 hours, you know about it. And then I became a general engineer.
Oh.
So which involved me putting this metal thing into a machine, pulling this bar down, which would bend the machine, and then stack that up there. I know. I was thinking, there's no way on earth that I could do this for the rest of my life. I needed to do something more, and I just couldn't wait to get into the Air Force.
Okay. So what did you say? You got through in the Air Force, got successful, and you joined up as, what did you do in the Air Force?
I joined up as an MT.
As in, what does that mean? Military transport, was it?
Yes, mechanical transport.
Mechanical transport.
I genuinely thought that I had no vision of what I wanted to do in the Air Force.
Okay.
So the first thing they offered me, I took.
All right.
And they must have wanted MT drivers at that particular time, and that's what I went into.
Yes.
So
I guess you wanted something so different to what you had experienced in the past and what you were doing at the time, donut and pulling down bits and pieces and engineering, but you wanted something different. It's like an escape, I get it, I suppose, was it?
Yeah. I think I was far more capable back then, but I was very quiet, and I was very shy as a child. I didn't want to disturb anything around me, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
I just wanted to get through life as easy as possible, and so I never projected myself out there. I just took what was that's part of the institutionalized thing. I just took what was given to me, really, and it just meant that I went into the Air Force and signed up as an MT driver. knowing that I was going to get somewhere to sleep, and knew I could get something to eat, and potentially I had a job.
I get that. So what was the experience like in the Air Force for you then?
Yeah, I think that deep down in me, I was more of a maverick, but I was still being compliant to everything. I also took the view that I still wanted to do dodgy things, but I never wanted to get caught, if you see what I mean. So
Okay.
I needed to be one step ahead of everybody that I come into contact with, and that's how I saw things. So I didn't like taking orders. I didn't like that at all. But you're in the Air Force, you have to take orders. And so I was just adapting to what was being put in front of me. I found the Air Force really easy to get on with. Initially, as I said, I was really, really quiet. And it was only the persistence of a few people who are real good friends of mine now that got me out of my shell. There was a guy, I don't know if you know, Phil Reed.
I know that person.
Yes, so Phil was at Marham when I got there. And
so that Marham was your first posting, I take it?
Marham was my first posting. I got posted to Marham for my sins. And when I got to Marham, I just wanted to keep myself to myself. And Phil used to come around to my place every weekend and say, come on out. And I used to say, no, I just want to stay and watch TV, you know, and just do my thing. But eventually he convinced me to go out, and I thought, wow, this is great. You know, drinking, women, wow, why wouldn't you, right? And yeah, that opened up a new world for me, which I tried to exploit.
So in that exploitation, then you did some traveling around in UK and abroad and all that, did you?
Yeah, so I got posted to Germany at one point, but I also went on detachments to Cyprus, Sardinia, Malta. Before Malta closed down, I mean, just before Malta closed down, I was sent out with a bunch of people to help sort things out.
Okay.
Again, I was only 17. I was only just 17 and a half, and it was a brand new experience to me, even to go abroad. Even
yes, it would have been.
Was magical. Yeah. Wow. I had been I went abroad at school once in the home, and that was it. But to go off into, say, Malta and just meet different people was amazing for me. It was a shock.
I can imagine that. And then you got it posted to Germany, did you say?
Yes. So I did a couple of detachments to Cyprus. They were like 2 weeks or 3 weeks long, and then I got a posting around about 1981 to Germany. I got to post.
Did you ask for that?
So the story is, right, there was a group of guys at Marham that used to run around and do things together, you know, having a laugh. But there was one instance where things went wrong. And I think that the military came down and started posting us all over the place, because we all seemed to get postings all at the same time. And it just broke us all up. And so we went, I got posted to Germany. And just met a whole new bunch of guys there, which is great.
When you say guys, right? So, you know, experiences, birds of a feather flock together, right?
Yeah.
But most of the guys were of African and Caribbean extract and that sort of thing.
Yes, most of them, but not all of them. But most of them were from Caribbean or let's say they're black.
Yes.
But obviously they had different different ways of going about things, which was really interesting. You know, people come from, I hadn't heard people come, you know, speaking the Brummie accent. Right? Black people speaking Brummie accents, right? I hadn't heard that so much. But when it got to Germany, there was quite a few people that did that, as you know, right? All these things were really interesting to me.
Yes.
Yeah, so I guess I was interested in psychology and all that sort of thing back then, even before I started studying it. So yeah, there was a whole bunch of black guys that I used to run with in Germany, which was just a laugh. It was just a huge, pleasant experience that I had.
So coming from a background like you had, you know,
Yeah.
being so, as you said, institutionalized
Yeah,
regime,
yeah,
and all of a sudden you're in the flung of the world, you know, the world, the big
yeah,
wide world in the Royal Air Force, and
yeah.
you know, living the life. It was quite a difference, wasn't it? I would imagine.
Yeah, so there was that initial uh, period where I held myself back, but once I started to relax, boy, did I relax and really enjoy it. You know, I really set out to enjoy myself when I was in Germany.
You didn't get yourself into any bother, did you, with Her Majesty? Yeah, sort of regime.
No, so I guess I still had that part of me, which was to do certain things that were not. I would bend the law but not break it. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
It may fracture a few times, but I wouldn't actually break the law.
So do you believe, right? So you've grown up into this world now in the RAF. You're becoming a man, so to speak, and no doubt getting to where you're probably having relationship, father and kids, whatever. Do you believe your experience, the experience of your childhood, you know, affected your adult life at all?
It did. It really did, and it probably affected my kids. To be fair,
Your kids?
yes.
Okay.
So, for instance, yeah. So growing up in a home. Let's take Christmas. Okay, Christmas.
Mm.
So my vision of Christmas is what happened in the home. In the home, what happened was nobody bought people presents. That didn't happen. What happened was on Christmas Day there was a box, and there was toys in the box, and people took turns to go up and pick things out of the box.
All those years, that's the only experience you experienced of Christmas.
That was my experience of Christmas. And so when I got with my partner and had my kids, I really lent on her to find out what the traditions were of Christmas. So buying presents for my kids. I guess here's the thing, I think that I never, and I still don't today, really appreciate when people buy me things.
Because you're not used to that?
Yes, because I was never used to it. But, you know, when I knew that it was important for me to buy things for my kids and for them to experience the day, but that was really me leaning on my partner.
No.
And so it's little things like that you don't really notice, but stepping back, I can see it now. So, you know, I can only assume that, no, my kids are growing up great and they're fine, but I am aware of those things.
So
it affected me in those sort of ways.
That's really interesting. So have you ever shared your experience then with your partner and of course your children, you know?
Right. As a result of you asking me that questionnaire, right,
Yeah.
I reached out to my eldest and I asked her how much she knew about my past. And
That's your eldest child?
Yes.
Okay.
And she came back and said, yeah, you told us some bits and pieces, but not much.
Okay. Okay.
So a lot of the content of this they won't know.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay. Because I suppose you were quite reserved in what you said to them, right?
Yeah. You know, thinking about it now, I was no different from my dad in terms of wanting, you know, keeping things to myself.
Oh.
Do you see what I mean? I can see.
Yes, I get that.
I never wanted to be like my dad, but you know, somehow I did keep things to myself, and that is very much like him.
Do you think then that affected your children or child? You know, because I believe that affected you the way your dad didn't sort of share anything with you.
Yeah, I guess it's my hope is that as generations go past, generation after generation, these types of things break down and they become less of an issue.
Yes.
So I can't point to anything in my kids and say that they're like me in that respect, but I can assume that they are in some ways, in some little way, that they are a bit more reserved than they should be.
Do you think your children would like to hear a bit more of your past? I know you said you shared something, but do you think they'd like to know a little bit more deeper? Do you think they'd appreciate that?
Yeah, they're waiting for the book. I did say to them that I would write a book which would capture all the things that we've talked about and more.
Okay.
There are so many other stories that I could tell about growing up in the home, the impact of just going from London to Bristol. And so what an example of that is I went to Bristol and I was told to go to school. I goes into the school and I see kids sitting at their desks. They're not running around screaming like I've been used to in London. They're all sitting at their desks. And the strange thing was the teacher was sitting at the front and she'd say to Sarah, could you just read this passage in the book? And she would read a passage and she'd go, John, can you read this passage in the book? And he would read something. And then she said, Frank, would you read this passage in the book? And I couldn't read. In fact.
So how old were you at that time?
8.
And you couldn't read?
No. And here's the thing, Don. I thought that people just looked at the book and made up stories as they're looking at the book.
No.
I did. I didn't know. I didn't know that the words meant something. I've been going to school all that time. Well, I don't know. But I didn't know what it meant to read.
Wow.
So I got up because you had to stand up and read. And I looked at the pictures and I just made up a story.
That's amazing.
It's so stupid,
so
isn't it?
going from 8 and what? How long did it take you to learn to read from age?
Obviously they then could see that I couldn't read, and then they put me on a reading program. But that wouldn't have happened to me if I was stuck in London.
No.
You see, I would have just done what everybody else was doing in London. And
so you'd have graduated.
That was one of the changes in my life. I suddenly had to do these different things.
So if you think about it, then there must be quite a few people who got turned out into the street then at 16, very unable to grasp just the basics of, education.
Absolutely. And when I left school, I had no qualifications. When I left school at 16 and a half, I had no qualifications. And part of the therapy I went through made me aware of the fact that I had all these other emotional things going on at the time. Learning stuff wasn't one of them.
Okay.
I used to go to school to socialize, to mess around with things at school, as I did when I was at London, right? And
yes.
I did that all the time I was at school until I left school. And I can visualize it now, like the last day of school when I left the gates and I was thinking, so what am I going to do? Who's going to employ me? I don't know how to do anything. And I wanted to educate myself. And from that day till this, I'm still educating myself.
So what have you done in terms of education then?
So initially, when I went to the Air Force and I was with the boys drinking and doing all that stuff, I got to a point where I was thinking, must be more to life than this, right? And so I started doing my O-levels.
Okay.
Whilst I was in the Air Force. And then when I came out of the Air Force, I started to do A-levels. And then I did a diploma in computer science. And then I started doing my MBA.
Wow.
I didn't finish that, but I started doing the MBA. And then I did a degree in psychology.
A degree in psychology?
I did a degree in psychology, and then I did a master's in positive psychology and coaching psychology.
So having left school at 16 and a half with
Exactly.
very, very little, and you achieved so much. Can you imagine if you were given the right opportunity in the first place? Sky's the limit would have been the limit, right?
Yes, but I do, well, thinking back, the people in the home and people at school did try to educate me. For instance, I remember being in class, and I was doing really, really well at maths, and they said that I was doing really, really well. They were encouraging me, and then what they did was they promoted me up the grades, 2 grades.
Okay. Yes,
right?
yes, yes.
And so I go into my first lesson of maths, 2 grades up.
Yes.
I see that people are sitting around at their desks. They have their ties done up, right?
Ties even.
They had the ties done up. The boys had the ties done up, not in the grade that I was in, the lower grade, right? And I was thinking, and all they did was maths. And I was thinking, I don't like this. So I purposely got things wrong so that I could be demoted back down to the other class.
No.
So it wasn't that they didn't try, to be fair to them. It's just I wasn't really ready for it.
That's amazing. You know, stories like that.
It was seriously only at the point where I suddenly realized, you know, what am I going to do with my life?
And that reality kicked in, was it at 16 and a half, or was it something later?
Half, yeah, when I left school. The very day that I left school, it dawned on me. I was basically willing to run back in and say, open the doors, let me back in. I promise I'll learn something. But it was too late.
So what happened after the Air Force then?
So whilst I was in the Air Force, I was an NCO in the Air Force, and I was in charge of one of the billets. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So the accommodation. I was in.
Sorry. How long did you do in the Air Force?
I did 13 years in the Air Force.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
But towards the end of my time in the Air Force, I was in charge of this billet, and we had to do this thing called ball night, where you make everything in the building spick and span, so it could be an officer would come in the morning and inspect the building.
Okay.
Right, and so we had to get things spick and span, and it was my job as an NCO to make sure those little blighters got out off their pits and did the cleaning, right? And I went into this room where this guy, I used to get people on my floor out. They used to come around, and I used to give them a talk to say, this is what we're going to do, right? We're going to clean the whole place up. And there was one, the guy didn't come out of his room. So I goes into his room, and he's meddling with his box. I said, what the bloody hell are you doing? He says, oh, I'm building a computer. I said, a computer? He said, yeah. He says, I'm an engineer. I can build computers. I said, a computer? Because at those times, computers were in mainframe systems, and they weren't small PCs. This is before PCs came along.
Yes.
And he says to me, look, I could teach you how to program the computer, because I'm only interested in hardware stuff. And he taught me how to program a computer. And at that point, I realized that this come easy to me, programming.
Really?
Yeah. And at that point, I thought to myself, I want to leave the Air Force and do this. And so when I left the Air Force, I joined the software house as a programmer.
Really?
Yeah, because I used to buy books, and I just read all these programming books all the time.
So that was natural to you. That came natural to you, programming, because it's not natural to anybody.
Yeah, the first program I wrote was, you know, the one where you got the ball bounces up and you got these little paddles and you can.
Yes.
I wrote one of those. That was the first program I wrote, and this is before PCs. You know, PCs were around.
Wow.
And so once I realized I could do that, I just bought. My money went on books. I used to go down and buy this book, read about this programming language, and just try them all out. And then I thought, right, I'm at the point now where I could get a job doing this, I think. And when I came out of the Air Force, that's what I did. I went to work in the software house.
Wow. How long did you work there for?
So yeah, I was quick all the time. I'm lucky because I come across these people that help you out, you know, like the
Yeah,
little angels. So
yeah.
the guy, when I went for the interview for to become a programmer, this guy, you know, although I read all these books, I know I didn't go to university, right? And so I assumed that people had better standards of programming than me. So I went into this interview with this guy, and he's still a friend now. And the first thing he said to me is, "Oh," he looked at my CV. "Oh, you was in the Air Force?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, I'm in the TA." I said, "Oh, okay, right." And then for the rest of the interview, that's all he talked about. And he's talking about the TA, right? And I'm thinking, when's he going to ask me computer questions, right? And then at the end, he said, "You'll have to come back next week and meet my boss." And I'm thinking, have I got the job? I haven't even said anything, right? And then I go the following week to meet his boss, and obviously his boss isn't interested in computers. He just wants to know who I am.